Right, for the final time this season, well, it might not be the final podcast of this summer. Jake Ellacott is waving a thumb at us. That means the podcast, Podful of Saints, I think it's called, number 45 for the season, 2021-22 season is underway with myself, David Tavener. As we mentioned there, man with a thumb even, Jake Ellacott.
Dave, I think after 45 episodes, you've finally forgotten how to do an intro. This is awful, but hello, everyone. Hello, Dave.
Hey, mate, that was his best one. Leave him alone.
Yeah, thanks. That's Lee Wood giving support there.
Good evening, David. Good evening, Jacob. Good evening, Zach Michael Van Gerwen. Good evening, everybody. How are we doing?
We have an extra face here tonight. Neil Metcalfe from the Herts Advertiser. You may have read his articles many times. Hands on the review.
Nah, no one's read them, man.
Right,
No
as you may have detected there, Neil isn't quite from these parts. Well, tell us about your shirt you got there, Neil. Well, I can't actually see
this.
you.
This is my hometown shirt. This is, I'll get that right. That's the Hebburn Town badge. Hebburn Town, Northern League, Northern Premier League, Division 1 East side as they are now. But FA Vars winners back in 2020. Well, the 2021, which was played in 2021.
Winners. Is that a word we know?
Apparently, I think I wrote it down once somewhere.
Right, Neil also goes under a name called the Herts had this week of Mouth of the Tyne. As you may have guessed from his shirt, that's where it's from. Of course, you got that shirt there, Neil. Who do you actually support? Big Gateshead or someone, wasn't it?
Really, Tottenham, yeah. Don't
Why?
Of that story. That's just a heartache on all sorts of levels.
Right, we got that out of the way. Neil will be butting in throughout, no doubt. We start by finishing the season off, if that makes sense. Last Saturday at Clarence Park, 7th of May, Tonbridge Angels were our visitors. Final league game of the season, and following defeats in their 3 previous visits, they won this time, 3-2. I thought for the final game of the season, it was actually quite entertaining. It was quite a few chances going at either end. What did you lot make of it? Who wants to go first?
I think Lee should go first. He looks like he's got a lot to say.
Not really, buddy, if I'm honest. It had that sort of, it had that end of season feel to it, didn't it, fellas, really? I agree with you, Tabs. It was quite entertaining in parts. You know, the football was liberal at best. But I think, you know, it just reiterated the fact that how badly we need a break. And the players looked leggy and lethargic. But yeah, it was a good game to watch in the sunshine, but that was really it.
Well, Tonbridge started really well, didn't they? Had a couple of chances in the first couple of minutes. They couldn't find a way to goal, so Tom Bender gave them a hand. But then we came back, 2 goals in 7 minutes. Michael Clark's first of the season, and Johnny Goddard. And we should have gone on from there and won, shouldn't we? They sacked their manager early in the week. Goodness knows why. Yeah,
I mean, Tonbridge went into the game into, I think, not far off disarray on the playing side of things. I think it's fair to say, you know, they were supposed to have their awards evening on Saturday night. That got cancelled at the request of the players after the sacking of the management. And I mean, really, I think you saw, the disappointment in Ian's post-match, which I think as part of it was, of course, the whole season. But I think he was very disappointed with the performance of a lot of the players on Saturday. And, you know, as Lee said, you know, it's really just a glorified end of the season game, wasn't it? Not much on it. But once you go 2-1 ahead, you've got to be holding on. And once again, you know, set pieces, poor defending. It's just the same old story that it's been all season at the back. You know, going forward, we created a couple of decent chances. But again, it's the defence and inability to keep goals out that lets us down. And I think that probably sums up the season as a whole.
Jake mentioned Ian's disappointment there, Neil. You sat behind him in the press area, of course. Got a lovely view. You can see virtually nothing. Did you sense from the bench they weren't happy with the way it was going?
No, I mean, to be honest, because of the new dugouts, you don't hear as much as you used to with the old ones. But that sense of disappointment was evident in his post-match interview with me. He was, you know, I was trying to tease out little bits of information about the summer and what he was going to do, and he was just, he says, I'm just so disappointed. I mean, the match itself was it was basically the season squashed into 90 minutes. It was, you know, some parts were excellent. There was some really good attacking bits. Then it just petered out for no reason whatsoever and just ended up being lots of huff and puff, lots of promise, and absolutely zero end product. It was just such a disappointment, but what we've come to expect since the second half of the year.
Tonbridge sacking Steve McKimm earlier in the week, that was a bit of a surprise, wasn't it? He'd got them up to this division, the highest they've ever been. We've had a couple of years there now, consolidating, no real danger of going down. Going into the match, they had 14 points from 13 games. We had 8 from 13. It seemed an odd one, didn't it?
Well, they've got a new manager now, so they've moved on very, very quickly. They've got the old Maidstone boss, is it Jay Saunders? He was announced. He was announced today. He's moved across from Margate, and they've also announced a couple of released and retained, which I think one of the goal scorers has gone. He's on his way out. So they obviously had a plan. They obviously just decided that Steve McKimm, his time was done. I think he was disappointed with how it happened. That was clear. But there you go. Football moves on, and we're just, they're obviously happy with a lot now.
Well, while we're talking about managers, should we talk about Ian Anderson? Why not? Is he under pressure, do you think, from a club or supporters? Anyone? Who wants to go with that one?
I think he is. I mean, he has to be, but he puts himself under enough pressure anyway. I mean, the main element of success in terms of a footballing side is a good spine, game changers off of the bench, and that good right balance of youth and experience. I don't think we've got any of that, really. And if you look at this side at times, especially early on in the season, there is something to suggest we've got something. But we're not quite sure that something is impossible to sort of quantify because we've been so bad and so inconsistent over the course of 4 months. I mean, Ian keeps... He's a loyal manager. He's very, very loyal, but he keeps picking these players that are letting him down. And then I think that's where the pressure comes from. That's where the frustration in terms of the fans. And I mean, there's nothing to be impressed by in terms of the numbers that these players are putting out, apart from Jeffers' goal scoring form, certainly. But the thing is, how many times has he blasted the inconsistencies, in post-match for their shortcomings, yet he continues to pick them. It sounds as though with a director of football in charge, we don't know the recruitment policy now. So we don't know how many players we're going to get in over the course of a summer. But yes, Ian is under pressure. And he should be, because results have been poor, performances have been terrible. And, going by a few of the fans that we spoke to, Jake, on the terraces, they are some blinkered opinions coming out of there. But on the whole, you cannot look at the last 5 months of St Albans City and say it's been good to watch.
Jake?
Yeah, Dave, I think you can separate it into supporters and the club. I think the club, obviously, we don't know. I suspect the club are probably happy overall with Ian this season. Got them a good cup run, got them a lot of money, got them comfortably in the Conference South with not too much concern, really. But fan perspective wise, I think there's definitely a lot of pressure. I think supporters, both long-term and short-term supporters, of course, we've got again a lot of new supporters. They came on this season when we were in a good run. Now we're not. And the longer-term supporters have seen this happen quite a few times under Ian now, this second half season form that just really falters away for inexplicable reasons. And I think you can see it's not just a small minority of supporters. If you look on social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc., of course, there's going to be negative comments on there. We know what social media is like. But there's a lot of comments suggesting that should Ian go, people are questioning his position. And, I, for one, really like Ian. I think he's been a great servant. But I think there is absolutely pressure from supporters. And I think that's understandable after the second half of the season we've had again.
Neil, I know you watched this podcast last week when we talked about the director of football at this level. What's your opinion on that?
I think it can work to a point. I mean, the whole director of football at Saints is a strange thing because I thought Dean was brought in to be the academy guy and would, obviously have an input from that point of view, but seems to be maybe there's a question about what he's poking into first team affairs and club affairs, which is fair enough if that's the way they're going to go. We don't know the ins and outs, and trying to get an answer is hard. So it can work. It can be a blessing to have someone outside of the manager that'll go and look at players and do all that job that he cannot do because he's at training on a Tuesday, match on a Saturday. But it just needs to work. It needs to be working in harness. They need to be working in sort of together. And whether that's happening, I don't honestly know.
Well, as Lee's pointed out, form by the club in the second half of the season was pretty atrocious. And that coincides with a time that Dean was director of football, and we didn't see any fresh legs coming in, which is the main thing you would expect from a director of football. As you say, we thought he was doing the academy originally, but he has moved on to this role, and we're failing to see the benefits of it, perhaps.
Tabs, can I just say to Neil as well, my main concern is that Ian and Dina have two different philosophies in terms of the way they play their football and the way they approach the game. You know, Dean is very much about the process and the progression and, you know, building of youth. Ian's results-driven man now. You know, he wants the success now. He hasn't got a lot of time left on his side. I mean, Dave, you can tell how bad the season's been, mate, because those two have torn all their hair out. So it's, you know, that's how bad it is. But the thing is, I'm not suggesting that the players we've got are bad, but they're only good on occasion, and that's all they are. You know, they are occasionally good players. So we need to recruit wisely. We need to recruit better. But in terms of the director of football, if it's going to work, you know, Dean's had a good run at it now. He's been there for what, a good part of the season. So you would have thought we'd have seen some benefit to it by now.
Well, we saw the best of the players when they were attack-minded early in the season. Now, there was a clear shift in policy. I don't think it's come from the bench, talking to Ian last week. So you wonder where it's come from. But the players changing their mentality, not to get forward quickly, but to hang on to the ball and we rebuild. And most of the time, it got us nowhere. It just seems like a shift in tactics, which didn't work for us, and we didn't go back to how we were when maybe we should have done, with still time to change things.
Well, that happened on Saturday because it started off really, really well. There was sort of, you know, you had Lancashire and you had Joe Neal as wing backs, and they were so advanced. They were playing as practically wingers, and it was working. I mean, there was chances being created. They scored twice, and then all of a sudden they stopped. Now, second half, they seemed to change into a back four with Dave Deasy moving to right back, and whether that was a plan to see how things were working in a competitive environment, I don't know, but Saints are always at their best when they go forward. I always bang on about the first season I watched, which was the first season Ian came in, and it was that great run at the end that culminated in the win over Dartford to stay up. And it was a 4-2-4 formation where they had four attackers, and then even the midfield were attack-minded. And it was great to see they just went forward with abandon. And yes, they would concede one or two, but they'd score. It was Keegan-esque, you know. So Saints are at their best when they do that, but they're going to have to work out where and what the tactics are going to be for next season and try and fit the players in around it. It's going to be difficult.
It could be Ted we had better players then, without putting this lot down, so they could play that way. But they showed us for a chunk of this season they could play similar to that sort of stuff. And I think it's bamboozled everybody how it has changed. And you wonder what the tactics will be for next year. We find out with the signings, whether they're attack-minded or solid unit signings.
Well, you would have mentioned there's going to be a lot of signings because, I mean, who would you guys keep out of the current squad? Maybe 6 or 7, if that?
Well, let's chuck in the players' points per game ratios, see if that gives us any guidance.
No.
Up until the last 2 games, Alex Lancashire was top. He got pushed off by Romeo Akinola, didn't play in those 2 games, so he went above. So you got Akinola's top on 1.6. This is the players who play 15 games or starting appearances or more. Alex Lancashire, 1.59 points per game. And then you got Callum Adebayo, Joy McKenna, Avon Jones, Hugh Dawson, Michael Johnson, David Deasy, Sean Jeffers, John Goddard, Mitchell Weiss. That's your top 11. Would you put all of those in your starting 11? No.
I think a lot of these players haven't got the body of work this season. They haven't been consistent enough for me. Frustrating players. But the thing is, going back to what Neil's saying there, you know, I would keep players like obviously Goddard and Banton, but only if they can be played in their positions. You know, it's a case, if Ian's going to try and fit them in a system that doesn't really utilise their skill set, then it's counterproductive. We had this conversation over the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks. Ian either needs to get the best out of the players and make an attacking system, or mug them all off. He knows his system, he knows his tactics, and buy the players that are going to utilise that to their strengths.
Well, he did
Another
say to
thing to
me
chuck in
after
there.
the game. I would say he did say to me after the game. I asked him about would there be any changes over the summer in terms of tactics, and he says, to be honest, it depends on who we buy. If we can only get a bunch of cloggers, for example, you have to play it a certain way. So it's a massive summer. It really is a massive summer.
You say about who we're getting here, and that's the point I was coming on to. You look at what's happened in the last 6 or 8 months. We haven't brought players in really, a couple on loan and one from Hendon, and that's it. So should we be concerned of what's going to happen during the summer?
I think
Ian is normally, sorry, Jay, Ian is normally very active during the season, let alone in the summer.
I think definitely. And, you know, those players we brought in, did they really work? I mean, Bailey Brown's points total per game is pretty kind, but really, did he have the impact in midfield? And no, not really. Cameron Green, I'd say, didn't really work out like people expected. Avan Jones, I think you could say the same. They filled in holes, but did they really do and provide the step up we needed when they came in? No. And I just don't know how it's going to work. I mean, interestingly, at the fans forum, Ian and Dean, didn't they? They spoke about signings, didn't they, Lynn? What was noticeable was a lot of the players they talked about was how Dean knew the agents very well, and they were agents he could trust. And I think this feeds back into, again, last week, talked about the club having this philosophy. Are they only going to sign players that suit a certain philosophy? If so, that narrows us down a lot in terms of players we can sign, especially if we lose some of the players this season that have been what you would call standout compared to the rest. Because if you lose 1 or 2 big names this season that have been our better players, then you really are starting from scratch. So as Neil says, it's a massive summer. And I think the last couple of signings, I think supporters will be concerned, I think understandably.
Yeah, I mean, it's all well and good. Sorry, Tav, sorry. I'll say it's all well and good, you know, Dean knowing the agents, but it hasn't got any quality players in over the process. So, you know, maybe that needs to be evaluated as well. But the fact of the matter is, fellas, we tried to sign some good players and they just didn't come off. I believe there will always be good players willing to sign for St Albans City. It's just whether they're the right players for Ian, whether they're the right players for Dean, whether they're the right players for the people that pull all the purse strings. But you've all alluded it to there, fellas. The attendances will not be what they are if we keep going and churning out these gutless performances, because we need to hit the season running, and by doing that, we need to sign quality players.
In your review of the season, Neil, you mentioned some more youth players coming through, as in Aaron Austin and Sam Meeks, a midfielder and a forward. With Dean Austin and his obviously foot in the academy camp, do we see this happening? More and more academy players coming in, and how big a risk is that if we don't strengthen it with seasoned players at this level?
Well, I mean, let's get it out the way first. It's fantastic that academy's there and that these players are coming through, because it's been missing for years, absolute years and years and years. Sam Meeks has done all right for himself. I mean, he didn't get much of time at Hitchin, but he's played the last couple of games at AFC Dunstable, step 4 and scored a couple. He could come in and be a decent squad player. The squad players, that's what they are, the same as what Hugh Dawson and Alex Lancashire. But Ian alluded to the fact that maybe he's going to have to change his thinking about signings when I was talking to him after the game on Saturday, to go and look at the National League, look at some players who are not necessarily at the end of their career, but are being released, will be possibly moving down to get more game time, and would bring out extra experience, because you're losing David Noel. That's a virtual guarantee, I think. So then you need someone with a bit of experience in there, more than one really, 2 or 3, who are going to do a job. So I think the academy is great, but you do need that experience alongside it, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt.
Another thing you mentioned in your article, Neil, was you thought the club could afford to win promotion this season, so they could have invested in players, because we've already done rather well the last year or two bringing money in, and the owners didn't have to put any in the last financial year, and probably not in the current one either. And you were saying, get up to that higher level, you get the big clubs coming down here, our gates are good, they get even better. It could become self-financing, but of course, we didn't take the gamble to go for it.
No, well, this is the thing. I mean, the National League, you look at the teams in the National League now, and it is no longer the plucky non-league teams of years and years gone by. It's ex-football league clubs. I mean, currently you've got the likes of Stockport, you've got Wrexham, you've got, I mean, Oldham are coming into it next year, Scunthorpe are coming into it next year, Notts County are in there. There's some massive clubs with huge fan bases who will travel in numbers. So if you're getting 1,500 at the park at the minute, and that's with away attendances at, what, 100 max, certainly you're going to be getting an extra maybe 900 fans on top of that. So you're into the 2,000s already. All the money that comes with that from all the refreshments and the food and the drink and the ticket money and everything else. It's going to be, there's money from BT for live matches because they do National League games. St Albans would be a draw with the likes of Ian Allenson and Dean Austin at the helm, sort of thing. You know, that will attract people. I really can't see. People say, oh, well, we won't be able to compete. Maidenhead have done it for years, and they haven't got any sort of a budget bigger than what St Albans have. So I honestly thought this was such a missed opportunity this year. Really, really was. So it's, you know, it's there if they want it. They just have to make sure they get it.
Oh, that makes sense. You go along with it, Lee?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you boys know, I work with 4 National League clubs, and you know, some of them are ex-pro teams as well. And I was speaking to them, and they always mentioned St Albans City to me. This was before the Forest Green game, and they were very impressed. They had a couple of scouts go down there and just check us out. Really, they were very impressed with our movement and our passion and the way we played the game. And then they just absolutely hammered me from like sort of mid-January onwards. What happened to you boys? What happened to you boys? You know, the players that they were looking at fell right off the radar. And it's, you know, it doesn't take a lot to establish yourself in that division. Yes, okay. I think the gap between the better sides and the lesser sides is a bit more evident. But that said, you can compete. Look at Wildstone, you know, we went toe-to-toe for them with seasons, and they're holding their own. You know, even though Kings Lynn and Weymouth, they're struggling and they're, you know, they'd go sort of down, but, you know, with a bit more of investment. But they saw, as Neil said, they saw increased crowds. They saw, you know, more money. But it was just unfortunate that they sort of didn't have the players. But I believe that they're in that sort of catchment area where maybe you're not going to go down to Weymouth. You're not going to pull players down there. Maybe not even as much as Kings Lynn. But St Albans City, absolutely. We've got an absolute pool of players around the area that we could choose from. And with Ian's contacts and Dean's contacts, I have no doubt we can assemble a squad to compete in that league. No problem.
What about you, Jake? Do you think we could compete in it better than we did last time?
I think absolutely. I think the club is much better set up for it. I think off the field, on the field, I think it's much more prepared. You know, when we went up that season, it was an amazing season, but were we truly ready? Not really. I think we lucked in with a very good manager and very good players. You know, they've all become City legends, quite rightly. But I think this time, you know, the squad, as we've seen, there is deficiencies in the squad, but I think off the field, we are absolutely ready. And we know that Ian Allenson can get promotion from this league when he's backed and supported. You know, you could argue about if the club wanted to go up or not, but I agree with Neil. Everything Neil wrote in his article on the Herts Ad website and everything he said today, that it's a wasted opportunity. Why not just go for it and see what happens? You know, we probably wouldn't have won the league, but you might have got in the playoffs. There's no guarantee you'd win the playoffs, but you've got to go for it. Football is about winning. And at the end of the day, you've got to support the management and the team and give them those resources to get over the line. Doesn't have to be a lot, but you've got to get there because the reward would be absolutely brilliant. You know, the club have loved this season with the promotion they've got from the FA Cup run. And of course, the National League's not comparable, but still the amount of exposure you get in the National League compared to the National League South is worlds above where we're at the moment. And I think it would only be positive for the club. And again, we talk about being a community club for the whole of St Albans.
It's funny, Jake, you mentioned there about a club giving the resources and whatnot, and they said that they did. The money was there for us to increase the budget or whatever, or to sign players during the season. And Lee mentioned the contacts of Dean Austin and the contacts of Ian Allenson, so we can bring the right players in during the summer. Well, we haven't got any evidence of it the last 6 months.
So what is the sticking point then, boys? You know, it's the case of something isn't quite right. And as Neil alluded to earlier on, mate, and you're absolutely spot on, you've got to get all the components working together in order for it to be fruitful. And it's just not happening. It's just not happening. Some people are saying that the club bottled it and they didn't really want promotion. I'm not entirely sure they don't want promotion, but I think they want to do it on their terms. And they are at risk of leaving the football behind. They're concentrating more about the club as an entity rather than the football team. And that's a very dangerous concept because, you know, Twitter followers come and go, but you know, good teams, they take time to build. And I just feel as though we've got something there and it just needs more focus on that at the minute rather than looking about, you know, kit launches and how many videos we can put out and all this subscribing. Fine, save that for the people, but get the football club, get the green working, get the players working together, get a team, get a unity, and then people will buy into that eventually. The rest will just follow suit afterwards.
Neil, your job for the Herts Ad, you cover a whole load of clubs, a big area. It's ridiculous. And also, given your knowledge of football clubs up north at this level, do you think we are a good position to be able to compete at that top level compared to the northern clubs? They get good games, but mind you, 8 clubs in our division this season had average crowds of over 1,000, which is almost unheard of down here.
I think gates are up across the entire non-league sort of landscape. The northern clubs and then the northeast clubs get massive. I always point towards South Shields, who are, you know, a step below St Albans, and they're getting average crowds of over 2,000, you know, because there is a passion up there. St Albans, though, if you look at the city and look at the surrounding areas, it's a big area of people, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be getting 1,500 standard every single week. I mean, it's what's the population of St Albans? It's 6 figures, or at least 90,000 people, you know. To get like 2,000 of them to come to a match, that shouldn't be a hassle, you know. So, but you've got to get the product right on the pitch. You've got to get the product right on the pitch. They're trying to get the little things around it which are going to help attract people and get people down. But if the product on the pitch is not right, then, you know, it doesn't matter. The fans will drift away. That's what happened. The reason the likes of South Shields get big crowds is because people got sick of the likes of Sunderland and Newcastle and wanted to just go back to experience football in its purest form. Non-league is that. And there's a joy there and there's fun, and you can have the family side of it, but you can also have the other side. And I don't know. It's just St Albans could definitely compete. There's no doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, they could. So it's just, again, getting it right.
I think Lee and Jake mentioned last week, it's amazing the crowds we're still getting. When you think our last 30 games of the season, we got 30 points, but that's relegation form for a long, long time, not a short run. So it's amazing, really. A crowd stood up as well as they did.
And you've got to remember that relegation form, there's 4 down next season. And, you know, this year there was just the one, and everyone was fit. You know, once you could put a couple of wins together, you were fairly confident of surviving. With 4 down next year, if you go on a run like St Albans have and don't get as many points as you should in 10 games, then all of a sudden the pressure will be truly on. So it's, you know, like I keep banging on, the summer next season is huge for the club. This was such a missed opportunity.
And you watch the teams around us now. You watch them spend money, fellas, because they don't want to be going down. You watch them spend money, and, you know, okay, it doesn't guarantee good players, but they are going to try their absolute best not to be involved in that quartet down there. And if we're not on it from absolute off now, we could be talking about us being in a relegation battle very, very early on.
Come on, Jake, come up with something optimistic.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, you know, the season before COVID, that same thing happened, didn't it? Poor start to the season, kept going on. And we probably, if the season had kept going, we could have easily been dragged into that bottom 2 and gone down, you know, easily done. So got to be really careful. I think, you know, the good thing is we have now built up these crowds. We'll be much better prepared for next season. But the club, you know, Ian, it was good to hear Ian in his post-match, just to take it back to players, to talk about looking at National League players that are getting released, because we've not really ever heard that from him before, I'd say. He's often looked at the leagues below. You know, we know he likes to pick a player or two from Hendon, etc. And of course, these players do a job, but are they truly what you want to make that final step? So it was really good to hear that. But again, he needs to have the backing from the club. And I think we need to know, you know, in the next couple of weeks, I think we need to know what's going on in terms of, is Ian staying? What's going on in terms of budget, etc. So we can start preparing, because we already know, and we've heard whispers of other clubs approaching our players and offering decent money. They might not be true, those whispers, but we've heard it from a number of people. So we know that the club's going to have a fight to keep our best players, because as much as this terrible run of form has been, there's still players there that other clubs will want, because they also had a good season last season, postponed by COVID. So I think lots, you know, of course there's positives off the pitch, but on the pitch, Ian's got to do a lot of work over the summer, and I think the whole club, to get the team into position ready to fight from the off next August.
Well,
One of the
Ian did
fears, I
say
think-
it, didn't he, Dave? I mean, when we were speaking to him after the Oxford game, he believes that because clubs at the higher levels are now suddenly shrinking their squads, a lot of players are dropping down. There's a massive academy players who suddenly don't make it. They're suddenly coming into non-league football. So there's plenty of players going around, but it's shoving the quality. The quality's coming down, but you've got to pick the right player, and you've got to pick players with that. The likes of Liam Saul, you know, he was saying that he's one of the most technically gifted players that he's ever come across, but he just doesn't perform it. He just cannot get in to do it on a regular basis. So you know, a lot of the signings are going to have to be based on their mental attitude, their attitude to work hard and to really try and make a difference, because they want to get back into the Football League and they want to get back into the higher levels, but you've got to put the work in. And I think if you can get the signings right, and if the two of them can work together and say, right, him and him, let's get them, let's go and get them.
Well, one of the big fears of supporters is, of course, losing Sean Jeffers, 34 goals in 50 games this season. We don't get strikers like that coming our way too often. We're already hearing rumours of him talking to other clubs. But what would it take to keep him? Would it just give him a good package, financial package, obviously? Or does he need to see the players that we are trying to get and do get to convince him, yeah, this club is going to go somewhere next season?
I think,
I
was just say, I think, you know, maybe not necessarily seeing players to help him push, because I think, you know, he likes the players around him, but I think he wants to see the club want to push on. I think, you know, if you're scoring how many ever goals he did this season, that if you're not finishing in the top 7-8 finish, you're thinking, you know, I've not got much long left in my career. I've had a good career, been at a lot of clubs, earning decent money, you know, good career off the pitch, but I want to be still pushing for, you know, get a bit of silverware in the cupboard and get a bit of glory with a team. And, you know, I think that's a definite risk that a club will come along with a bit more ambition and, of course, money as well. You know, you can never forget about money at this level. That might come along and say, come on, Sean, do you want to help us get promoted to the National League? And I'm sure Ian at the start of the season said, you know, you can help us get promoted. But the second half of the season has definitely made all of us wonder, supporters, players, etc. Do we really want to make that final step? And I think Sean will be thinking, you know, because it's a big step for him, because he's not got many moves left.
Yeah. Would you be concerned if he went, Lee? I think you would.
Of course. But what I would say is that there's a reason why he's had 15 clubs. I've seen better strikers leave than Sean Jeffers. I would say that. And I mean, even the great Steve Clark, he left for a few quid more. You know, Frendo, Ischiafano, you know, they've all gone. But I would be concerned, because I think the way you need to sell it to Sean Jeffers is that he's the star boy as he's been billed. You know, he's the main man now. Build the team around him. Said, Sean, all right, mate, fine. You've been talking to X, Y, and Z. Here's a few more quid for you. We're going to give you incentives financially and in a footballing term. We're looking to sign this sort of player for you, this sort of player. Make it all about him. You know, if he's that sort of player that he needs lauded upon, then fine. But the thing is, the longer we languish, the longer we are just unproductive in the transfer market, the more his head's going to get turned. And I mean, without him, fellas, we'd be what? Down, we'd be relegated for now. And as you say, Taz, 34 goal strikers, they don't go on trees, especially at this level. So I am concerned, but if we play our cards right, I believe he'll stay.
He walked off with practically every award going, the end of season awards, top goal scorer, player of the year, players player of the year, and all of those. But he wouldn't be the first top goal scorer and player of the year to leave at the end of the season. But at least he does know what the supporters think of him, if nothing else.
Absolutely. But season before Sean came in, a little old man called Joe Chifano, old's a bit harsh, little bloke called Joe Chifano, came in, scored a lot of goals. I think, I think we had end of season awards that season, but but he still had his eyes turned and his head turned by a big offer at another club at this level. Didn't work out there. So maybe there's something for other players to learn. But, as you say, strikers aren't afraid of leaving. At the end of the day, they just want to be scoring goals for a club that is competing well.
I won't ask you individually whether you think he'll stay or he will go.
What do you think?
I'd be surprised if he's with us at the start of next season.
Really?
The evidence of the evidence that we got in the last few months, it's looked like a lack of ambition or a lack of ability to bring players in. So if he's like you and Jake has said, he wants to try and win something before his career's over, because he's 30 now. So he wants to get to a club that's going to almost guarantee him some sort of success. And with us, he didn't get it with us, but of course he will remember that day with Forest Green forever, like the rest of us will.
That's very true. That's true. Neil, you speak to Ian often enough. Do you think, he'd be willing to really push the boat out to keep Sean, or do you think he'd be saying, once it gets enough, goodbye and I'll look elsewhere?
He's as concerned, I think, as you guys are about, you can't replace that amount of goals too easily. And for as much promise as the likes of Sam Meeks has, you need another striker, a leading striker. So who are you going to get? I honestly think there's enough players being floated. Stevenage released their list of retained and released players, and there's some cracking players become available from Stevenage. Not good enough for them this season, but would be one or two would be perfect. And even if you go and try to get them, it signals an intent that you're going to try and do something different. You're going to try and make the effort to jump into the playoffs and then into the automatic promotion places. And that might just be enough for Sean Jeffers to go, I'll give you one more year. So he knows it's a battle. Ian knows it's a battle to keep him, so he's geared up for it.
Yeah, one thing we kept saying all through the season, how susceptible we are to high balls into the box. And the stats in the end prove it. We scored 7 goals with headers, but we conceded 18 goals with headers. Isn't it a concern that we couldn't sort out tactical problems like that as the season went on? Because it just kept recurring.
I think certainly it reminds me a little bit of when Ian got rid of Glenn Alzapidi. We had a lot of structural issues then in the squad. It wasn't really working. Brought in Chris Winton, and he helped turn things around. Now, I'm not saying it's Chris's fault. I think Chris is an excellent assistant manager, but we've got a lot of coaches on that coaching team, as we've talked about before. And I don't know whether it's an issue with the players themselves, just are not able to win aerial headers from corners, etc. But there is something wrong that just really needed addressing. And again, I think it's one of the many things this season that I'll never be able to really get my head around. I remember going down to Billericay on a Tuesday night, and every ball was just an aerial bombardment, and we couldn't get it out. And by the end, our own supporters were just gobsmacked. But every single header, we didn't win a single header. It was just embarrassing. So I'd love things to change, but it does concern me that wasn't addressed during the season and couldn't be fixed.
Yeah. Do you want to chip in anything extra, Lee?
I mean, to be honest with you, we had a little bit of a run, didn't we, in November, December, where our backline was actually okay and it performed well as a unit. Individually, they were very, very suspect, but collectively, they worked really, really well. And we went on a run of not conceding for, a game, big bunch of games. But I think individually they've got an atrocious game in them. Everyone knows my views on the back line there, but I just think you need the quality. You need that spine of the side, and this is where you spend the money, Neil, right? We've got an excellent goalkeeper. We've got one of the best strikers outside of the pro game. You just now need a streetwise central defender, and you need a absolutely experienced ball-winning midfielder. That spine, it speaks volumes, and there's a reason why teams continue to buy those sorts of players. It works. I just don't. The recruitment is going to be everything. With Jake and I know for a fact that the budget hasn't changed dramatically since the time we were involved there. So this has now got to be the 1 year where the club said, well, you know what, let's go for it. Let's push it out. Let's buy the quality of players that you want in. Let's go looking to the likes of the Barnetts and the Dagenhams and the Will Stones for these sort of players, because those are the sort of players that are going to, stabilise us and hopefully make us competitive again.
Neil?
Well,
just seeing if
That's
you're
the
awake.
content we pay for. That's the stuff.
Yeah.
yeah. You were right
I think
about
we covered most things.
goals. You're right about goals from sort of, high balls and this, because again, harking back to that first season of Ian's, you had the likes of Ben Martin and Darren Lock, who would score like close to 10 goals a season from corners and what have you. You had Lee Chappell hurling the ball in as another potent weapon. Maybe it's something like that. You just need that more creativity, I think. John Goddard, he's an enigma, that kid. He can be brilliant, but he's not creative. He got given the assist awards on Saturday. But did he truly assist this man? Yeah.
I think the assist is a stupid award anyway. It seems to be taken over in football now. They list the goal scores and they list the assists, which is absolute nonsense. They're all part of the team. All players should be able to help assist in one way or another. It's a stupid award. Another stupid award given out was Kyle Wiltshire for getting 16 bookings, most cards in a season. They didn't actually say it was 16, which is a new club record. And Kyle Wiltshire, I won't say he's one of the problems, but I don't think we saw the best of him this season. He looked more promising last year when we were watching on telly, I thought.
I thought he had so much work to blooming do in that midfield. He played almost every single minute this season. I think he needed support and help around him. And I just don't think it was there for him. And again, I think he's easily could be a player that could have his head turned by another club in this division that thinks, for a bit more money. We got him from Oxford. Really good signing. He's proven his worth, I think. I say Dave, not as good this season, but I think that's because he hasn't had people around him. But, we could easily lose him. But, going into that, and Neil, what you talk about Ben Martin, Darren Lock, apart from David Noble, do we really have, and we know Noble might well retire this summer, do we really have any leaders out on the pitch now? Really? Like you have in those championship winning sides or even playoff getting two sides, leaders, that's what you want out on the pitch. They don't have to be pretty, they don't have to be perfect, but they can do an excellent job. And I just don't think we have them. And even, this final run-in, how many games was Sean Jeffers captain? Sean's a great player, but is he really captain leadership material? I don't know.
We talk about leaders. Tom Bender came back into the side Saturday, made his 250th appearance. Do we think it's his last?
I had a feeling, I said to you at the start of the game, Dave, the three players that came in were Tom Bender, Dave Dijou and Zane. And I did wonder, was this the swan song for maybe all three of them? Because like Ian had said at Oxford, these have been very loyal players to the club. They've been very loyal players to him. But I just think maybe he's thinking it's time to really change it up. And those three would be the sort of ones to go.
Yeah, I don't want you to chuck names in who you think will go, but if you want to, go ahead, any of you.
I think out of those three, I love Big Dave, but I think Zane Banton would be a real loss. I think he's been a great player. I think there's still a lot in him that he could provide for the Saints, be it off the bench or starting. And I think we've seen in spurts this season. Again, he's not the only player that hasn't lived up to it this season, but that Forest Green game, brilliant goal, and he can do it. The other two, Big Dave, I think he could still be a utility man, but is he really? Again, we've got to be thinking about now. a team that we have got to try and get the top 7 next season, are those, Tom Bender, Dave Dijou, and there's probably others in the squad, really the ones to do it? I don't know. It's difficult, and I think we'll probably see quite a high turnover. And I think, would it be a bad thing for Ian to finally refresh his squad after a long time? Not necessarily. And I think it would keep fans interested and keep the club exciting. And, Lee said earlier, talking about the club pushing, I want the club to prove us wrong, and everyone negative about the squad going into summer, prove us wrong, sign these good players, sign us players that can get us into the top 7.
It's funny, we talk about good players, but quite often Ian's signings, when they come along, we don't know most of them. And we're thinking, oh, blimey, has he got it right? Has he got it wrong? And he does often pull out some good ones. We thought we had this season, but of course, it more than tailed off.
Yeah. But I think, it's difficult to say this summer what players will go because Ian wants them to go and what players will go because they get better offers at other clubs. It'll be really interesting to see how many go. And I think we're not going to find out a lot of information probably, next month and a half, until we can see Ian start putting his squad together. And, again, you've got the factor of a director of football. We've mentioned it enough.
The one good thing about Ian, that he does put a time frame nice and early on all these. So we've lost players like Ben Wyatt, good players, because he's not going to be dancing to their tune. Okay, so right, Ben, I need you to know by this, Reece-Mel Williamson, Joey Savano, he does want to get his business done nice and early, which is beneficial for us because he's going to need that time in the summer. Tabs, we sort of joked about how many pre-season games the club had at the start of the season, but by getting the business done early, that enables him the 12th, and that's probably why we had such a really hot sort of August and September, because the players knew each other. They got to know the system relatively well. Maybe that's why we kick-started so early, but by God, it tailed off. And, we're going to need some of those better players to see us through the whole season.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to the friendlies with high excitement, yeah?
I'd ask Neil quickly, if the Saints were any players at the top of the head that you think the Saints should be going for this summer, either names or positions that you think the Saints really should prioritise going into the next couple of weeks and months?
Well, I'm always a big fan of wingers. So any winger who comes in who's a proper winger, who hangs to the byline and whips across it, and that'll do for me. Looking at the Stevenage list today, when it came out, there was 1 or 2 names in there that I would say. I mean, one in particular, Jack Smith, the midfielder. He's just a young lad. He's only 21 or so. He was on loan at Kettering in the second half of the season, but he's a fantastic talent. And he's a ball winner, but he can also create things. So I think he's on the transfer list at Stevenage, but you could probably pick him up for buttons. He'd be the type of player I would like to see come. I mean, another one that got released, there's no chance of him ever turning up to St Albans, but Scott Cuthbert. You talk about a leader, he's 35 next month, but my word, he's still a fantastic footballer. I'm sure he'll find somewhere else easily. But, that type of player, but go for them. Even if you don't get them, go for them.
Oh, that's what we did with David Noble, wasn't it? We went for him, we signed him, and with Ben Nunn, 2 experienced players, signed them, might not have expected to, but got them in, and they had a brilliant impact. So why not go for it again? Just push the boundaries. What's the harm?
Absolutely.
I'd say there's a player. So Dagenham have they've fallen out of favour with Kenny Clark, who was their captain, big, strong, towering young centre half. He's now on loan at Southend, and I'm not saying for one instance we're going to get him, but he's the sort of player you can build your defence around. No nonsense. And Neil, you referred back to the likes of Ben Martin and Darren Lock. Does the simple things exceptionally well. Knows his role within the side, but you talk about leaders. Young, energetic, athletic, strong, quick, intelligent. Those are the sort of players. Dave, you sort of spoke about us looking towards the higher echelons of non-league now for those sorts of players. Kenny Clark could be an option for us there if Ian's looking to strengthen up his defence.
Again, though, when you're at that level, I can understand the club being a bit reluctant, because that certainly won't be a cheap player.
But good players aren't cheap, Dave. And we've reiterated as well. At what point do we stop becoming the also-rans? What point do we stop becoming the second half has-beens? You know, we've got to make a decision now how serious the club are about progressing off the pitch as well, but progressing on it, because at the minute we're just failing away season after season. You know, this is the fourth season now in a row where we've tailed off and we haven't really progressed at all. And we're putting all of our hats on one coat hook of the FA Cup, and it was a great day out, mate, but it doesn't make for a whole season.
I think one of you mentioned before about getting the signings in. If you do go for the bigger players like Kenny Clark, which maybe is the route Dorking Wanderers went down this season, they spent big and it almost paid off. They finished second in the league. But when you look at the likes of Havant and Waterlooville, they spent 2 or 3 years spending big, and they blew out. It didn't even make the playoffs. They lost at home to Chippenham Town final day of the season, and Chippenham getting to the playoffs. We know it's not easy. You've got to get your players balanced right, but to make that step up, you may have to spend a bit more than we allow in our budget.
I think with the academy, we've got an ability to probably try and get that balance right. You have got these players coming through now, our own players, younger players, cheaper players, but you've still got to have those big names and players that give you that final drive. And I remember when we signed Kyron Wiltshire last summer, I remember speaking to a lot of supporters and thinking, wow, this is, he's won the league and he's a good player at this level, midfielder. He can really help us kick on. And last season we did kick on, but now we're in a different world and we've got to try and refresh the squad again. You've got to make the changes. And I think Ian will want to. Hopefully he's backed by everyone at the club to try and make those changes.
Good. Well, I think we covered everything there, don't you?
Yeah. I just wanted to ask Neil quickly, this season overall as a neutral, how did you, or neutral, Herts had, how do you find it? And, I know you've said it feels like a wasted opportunity. Do you think the Saints can build again for next season? Do you have the faith in the squad to do it? Or
I do. Because it's happened already. It's been done. They've gone from that season prior to the COVID, where it was a side that was on its way down for long periods. They rebuilt, and suddenly then the couple of years through the pandemic was virtually unbeaten. They were very, very rarely did they get beat. So it can be done, and I've got faith in it happening. You do need to unearth a couple of gems from the lower leagues, but if you spend one or two, it'll make a massive difference. It'll just lift the club, lift the fan base. Once you've got that happening, sky's the limit.
That's a positive note. We'll go with that.
Positive.
We need to get this Neil bloke back on. I mean, he's so positive and happy. Wow.
Have a look at his article, Jake. You change your mind.
Oh, dear.
Good. One thing I would like to ask very quickly, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. How has the relationship between the press and the club been over the last sort of year now? Because obviously there was a little bit of a selection issue in terms of who they let in and etc.
There was. It's been better. Andy's come in and he doesn't have any journalistic experience, but then that's not a prerequisite for any media manager at a football club these days. So that's fair enough. He's learning about what we need. I haven't badgered him for much this year. I haven't needed to. It's been better. It is getting better. It can always be even better again, but I'm for the time being, I'm happy. So we'll I'm
you
sure
your happy face, is it?
Yeah, I'm sure by next year it'll be all like pesky kids and all that,
Good times. Good chat, fellas. Good chat.
Right, thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for this season. We're going to try and keep some going during the summer, I suspect, one way or another. And no doubt next season we'll get Neil back in as well. And there we go. What I would like to say is thanks for everybody who's offered their words of support in recent weeks. That's been much appreciated.
No, you've done well, fellas, this year. You've done really well. It's been really entertaining to watch. It's been lovely to being invited on. And I know everyone appreciates all the work you do. So keep it going, sons.
I can't believe
look at that. We got accosted in shops, didn't we? In a coffee shop the other day, Jake. We're like,
I know.
Are we going to be having podcasts throughout the course of the summer? People are What? People are yearning for it, Dave. Come on, Taz.
I
Give
can't
the
believe
people what they want.
I can't believe you had to slip Neil a 20 quid to say that. I mean, but yeah, if you want to let us know what you think, it's at Podful of Saints on Twitter, and I only echo that. Thank you very much for some reason still watching and listening to us. No idea why we talk some absolute crap, but yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and I think we'll see you very soon. And thank you very much, Neil, for joining us.
Top man.
Bye bye, everyone.
No.
Cheers, everyone.